that any parent who, God forbid, would be in our situation, I would hope that you would do the same thing. I would hope that you would ask for any help, receive any help to get answers, because at the end of the day, that's all we want.
A father is standing waist deep in open water, scanning a shoreline that goes on for miles, searching for a son the ocean hasn't given back yet. He doesn't know it, but somewhere out past the sandbar, past the boats still anchored from the night before, the answer is already floating just beneath the surface, close enough that a stranger will find it before he does. 2 days earlier, this same young man had been laughing on that beach, surrounded by friends, with his whole life still ahead of him. A football scholarship, a mother who just watched him graduate, a future that, by every account, looked nothing like this. Somewhere between that laughter and this water, something happened. Something nobody who was there has fully explained. Not his friends, not the girl he supposedly stayed behind for, not the sheriff's department that's been asking the public for answers ever since. What we do know is this: he never made it home, and a week later, the questions are only piling higher. A missing phone, a deleted account, a video nobody can agree on, and a family who refuses to accept the easiest explanation. This is a story about the last few hours of a young man's life, and everything that doesn't add up about them. Before we go further, this case involves the death of a teenager, and while we won't include graphic detail, some parts of this story may be difficult to hear. Please take care of yourself while watching. You're watching the Unsolved Vault, where the cases that don't add up get the attention they deserve. Today, we're digging into the death of Nolan Wells. Hit subscribe if this is your first time here. We've got a lot more of these coming. And while you're at it, drop a comment and tell us what corner of the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far this community reaches. All right, let's get into it. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was already too late to change what had happened. But rewind 2 days, and there's nothing in this story that looks like tragedy. It looks like an ordinary Friday night in a small coastal town. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old, home in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, on the evening of July 3rd. It had been a long day for his mother, Christine Wansley, the kind of day where coming home to a made dinner means more than most people realize. Nolan cooked her salmon that night. Not takeout, not something quick. He made the effort, because that was who he was. He'd graduated from Ocean Springs High School just months earlier, where he wasn't just a football player, he competed across multiple sports, the kind of student-athlete coaches build a program around. By that summer, he'd already secured his next chapter, a spot as a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College, with the coming season just weeks away. Everything about his life at that moment was pointed forward. His high school football coach would later describe him in words that weren't just polite obituary language. He said Nolan led by example, treated people with respect, and carried himself with a humility that stood out. The kind of praise that's easy to hand out after something terrible happens, except in Nolan's case, people who knew him say it was true long before anyone had a reason to say it publicly. That night, after dinner, Nolan said goodbye to his mother the way he always did. A hug, a kiss. Nothing that felt like a final moment, because there was no reason for it to feel that way. He left to spend the night at a friend's house, getting ready for a long holiday weekend with people he trusted. Nobody in that house that night had any reason to believe the next 24 hours would matter. Not his mother, wearing herself out from a long shift. Not his friends, planning nothing more than a boat trip to celebrate the 4th of July. Certainly not Nolan himself, who by every account was simply looking forward to a good weekend on the water with people he considered close. The next morning, July 4th, that group of friends loaded onto a boat and set out from the mainland. Their destination was a stretch of island most people outside the Mississippi Gulf Coast have never heard of. For Nolan Wells, it would be the last place anyone saw him alive. To understand what happened to Nolan Wells, you first have to understand where it happened, because Horn Island isn't the kind of place that makes finding answers easy. It sits roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, a barrier island covering just 4.2 square miles of untouched wilderness. Sand dunes shift with the tide. Sea oats and groves of saw palmetto stretch across the terrain, along with stands of pine trees and long, open beaches. It's federally protected land, part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, and officially designated as wilderness, which means there's no development allowed, no hotels, no restaurants, no permanent structures beyond a small ranger station near the island's center. There are no roads on Horn Island because there's nowhere for them to lead. No ferry service runs out to it, no commercial transportation of any kind. The only way to reach it is by private boat or charter, which means everyone who stepped foot on that island on July 4th chose to be there and arrived the same way Nolan did. With no infrastructure of any kind on the island, anyone out there is effectively cut off from the mainland for as long as they choose to stay. That isolation is exactly why Horn Island has become what one local resident described as the spot for teenagers and young adults along the Gulf Coast, especially in the summer months. It's far enough from the mainland to sit outside the reach of adult supervision or regular police presence, a rare stretch of freedom that doesn't exist in most Gulf Coast communities. According to that same local account, underage drinking is common out there, and friend groups tend to merge into larger crowds once they arrive, in a way that wouldn't happen back on shore. On July 4th, that reputation was on full display. A volunteer searcher who later helped look for Nolan described the island that day as packed. Boats anchored close together along the shoreline, groups of people waiting near the sandbars, moving between vessels, drinking, mingling. By every account, it was a typical chaotic holiday scene, loud, social, and almost entirely unsupervised. That was the setting Nolan Wells and his friends arrived into that afternoon. Whatever happened to him next didn't happen in isolation. It happened somewhere inside that crowd, on a beach with no formal oversight, no security cameras, and, as it would turn out, very few people willing to say exactly what they saw. By late afternoon on July 4th, the boats along Horn Island's shoreline began pulling anchor and heading back toward the mainland. Somewhere in that exodus, Nolan Wells' group made the same decision. But when their boat left the island, Nolan wasn't on it. This is the exact point where the story stops being simple. According to the friends who returned that day, Nolan chose to stay behind. Their account is that he'd met a young woman on the island earlier that afternoon, that the two of them had hit it off, and that he told his friends he'd find his own way back later, that she or someone in her group would give him a ride to the mainland. On the surface, it's not an unreasonable story. People change plans on a crowded beach all the time, but that's not the version attorney Ben Crump says the young woman gave to investigators. According to Crump, her account is the exact opposite, that Nolan told her he was heading back to rejoin his own friend's boat, not staying behind with her at all. It's worth being precise about where this account comes from. She has not spoken publicly or been named in any reporting on this case. What's on record is Crump's characterization of what she told investigators, relayed secondhand at a press conference, not a direct statement from her to police or media that reporters have independently confirmed. The friends' version, by contrast, comes from them speaking directly to press themselves. Two different sources, two different directions, and somewhere between them is what actually happened to Nolan Wells in those final hours. Crump himself has been blunt about it, calling the two accounts a straightforward contradiction, pointing out that one of them has to be telling the truth, and one of them isn't. There's one more detail that's added weight to the scrutiny surrounding that afternoon. One of the friends who left the island and returned to the mainland that day is the son of a sitting Jackson County Chancery judge. The judge, his mother, said publicly that her son left Horn Island around 4:30 that afternoon. On its own, that fact proves nothing. Plenty of families in Jackson County have ties to the local justice system, and there's no indication it has influenced how the case has been handled. But it's part of why this investigation has drawn the level of public attention it has. When a case this uncertain intersects, even by coincidence with local legal power, people start asking harder questions about whether every account is being scrutinized equally. What isn't in dispute is the outcome. The boat left Horn Island that afternoon, and Nolan Wells was not on it. He was never seen alive again. Why he stayed behind, and which version of that afternoon holds up, is the question this entire case still comes back to. Every piece of evidence that surfaces afterward, every witness statement, every disputed video, gets measured against that same unresolved contradiction. Two conflicting accounts coming from two different sources, and so far, no independent confirmation of either one. That night, with her son still not home and no word from him, Christine Wansley made the call every parent dreads having to make. She reported Nolan missing. She would say later that neither she nor her husband have slept properly since. Not naps between search updates, not the kind of exhausted sleep that eventually catches up with you. Just a kind of waking wait that hasn't stopped since that first phone call to police. The next morning, Nolan's father, Elmore Wansley, didn't stay home to wait for updates. He went out onto the water himself, alongside Nolan's football coach, searching the waters near Horn Island for any sign of his son. He found nothing. No boat, no belongings, no trace that Nolan had ever been out there at all. By then, the search had moved beyond a family looking for their child. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department launched a formal search operation, and it wasn't a small one. The Department of Marine Resources joined the effort. So did the United States Coast Guard, bringing in the kind of resources typically reserved for search and rescue missions at sea. Rangers from Gulf Island's National Seashore, the agency responsible for the island itself, joined as well, combing the terrain Nolan and his friends had walked just a day earlier. As word spread, so did the search. Christine Wansley began posting appeals online, asking anyone who'd been on Horn Island that day to come forward with information, photos, anything that might help locate her son. Her posts gained traction fast, reaching far beyond the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Among those who saw them was the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue organization based in Louisiana, known for stepping in during disasters and disappearances when official resources need reinforcement. They joined the search shortly after, adding boats, personnel, and local water knowledge to an effort that was quickly expanding by the hour. For 2 full days, all of it turned up nothing. Not the Coast Guard, not the Sheriff's Department, not the Rangers who knew that island's coastline better than almost anyone. Not a father searching the water with his son's football coach beside him, not a mother whose online appeals had reached strangers hundreds of miles away, all of them now looking for the same young man. 2 days of searching and still no sign of Nolan Wells. And underneath all of it, the question from the afternoon before still sat completely unanswered: why he'd chosen to stay on that island in the first place, and whether the reason he gave was even true. On the morning of July 6th, the search finally ended, but not the way anyone had been hoping for. A National Park Service ranger patrolling the waters off the northwest tip of Horn Island spotted something in the water. It was Nolan Wells, found face down, in the same stretch of coastline his family and searchers had been combing for 2 straight days. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind was brought in to examine the scene. He noted that the swimsuit the body was wearing matched the one Nolan had last been photographed in, taken on the island before he disappeared. It was enough to move the investigation forward immediately, though formal confirmation would take another day. By the following morning, dental records confirmed what everyone had already feared. The body recovered from the water was Nolan Wells. Lynn said publicly that he saw no obvious signs of trauma on the body, no immediate indication of a physical struggle or injury. But given how many questions remained about Nolan's final hours, he didn't stop there. A full autopsy was ordered, to be conducted by the state medical examiner's office, specifically to determine whether there was any evidence of foul play beyond what could be seen with the naked eye. Lind also offered some context that mattered. The waters off that particular stretch of Horn Island, he said, are known for strong currents. In his own words, there have been drownings out on those barrier islands many times over the years. It wasn't an accusation or a conclusion, just a fact about the coastline itself, offered by the one official who'd examined the body firsthand. But that explanation didn't sit well with everyone. Attorney Ben Crump pushed back publicly on the drowning theory almost immediately, pointing out that Nolan wasn't just a casual swimmer. He was a trained athlete, in peak physical condition, heading into a college football season. To Crump and to Nolan's family, the idea that a strong, capable swimmer simply drowned, unnoticed, in a crowded stretch of water surrounded by dozens of other people didn't add up. The state autopsy has since been completed, but completing an autopsy and releasing its findings are 2 different things. As of now, the official cause and manner of death have not been made public. The holdup isn't secrecy, it's process. Toxicology testing, which determines whether alcohol, drugs, or other substances played any role, isn't conducted in-house. Samples are sent to outside laboratories for analysis. One forensic expert familiar with these cases, a man named Ramsey, put the typical wait bluntly. He's personally waited as long as 2 to 3 weeks for toxicology results to come back, and sometimes longer than that. That waiting period hasn't sat well with a family already convinced something doesn't add up. At their request, a second independent autopsy is now underway, this one taking place in Washington, D.C. The family specifically sought out a medical examiner with no professional ties to Mississippi law enforcement, wanting an assessment they could trust had no connection, real or perceived, to the officials already involved in the case. So here's where things stand. 2 days after Nolan vanished, his body was found. 2 more days after that, and there's still no official word on how he died, only competing theories. One from the coroner citing the island's dangerous currents, another from the family's legal team insisting that explanation doesn't match who Nolan was. The question of why he stayed behind that afternoon is still unanswered. Now it has company. What actually killed Nolan Wells is a question 2 separate autopsies are trying to settle, and neither one has spoken yet. While investigators worked through official channels, a different kind of evidence was already spreading online, and it was moving faster than anything the sheriff's department could verify. The first piece centers on Nolan's phone. When his parents finally recovered it, they found it at the home of one of his friends, not on Nolan himself. What they found on it troubled them immediately. There were no saved photos from that day, no Snapchat activity at all from the 4th of July, despite Nolan being on an island surrounded by friends, sunshine, and exactly the kind of moment people usually document. His mother has described the account as showing nothing from that day at all. It's worth being precise here. Online, that empty account quickly got reframed as a deleted account, and speculation spread further from there, including questions about whether the phone itself was locked or left open for anyone to access. None of that has been confirmed by investigators or reported as established fact by any news outlet covering this case. What's actually confirmed is narrower and, honestly, still troubling enough on its own. An 18-year-old's phone recovered from someone else's home with no trace of the day he disappeared. The second piece of evidence is a video. It was filmed from a boat near the island, sweeping across the shoreline, boats anchored close together, small groups waiting near the sandbars. Nothing about the footage itself was unusual on its face. What drew attention was the audio. Buried in the background, a male voice can be heard saying, "Give me my freaking phone, what are you doing?" Attorney Ben Crump and his legal team believe that voice belongs to Nolan. They've pointed to it publicly as possible evidence of a confrontation in the hours before he disappeared, something that could suggest tension or worse in the moments nobody else has been able to account for. But one of Nolan's own friends disputes that entirely. Tristan Shepard appeared on Good Morning America and addressed the video directly. According to Shepard, the voice on that recording isn't Nolan's at all. It's his own. He told the network plainly that the moment captured in that footage is him yelling, not Nolan, and not a confrontation involving Nolan in any way. That leaves 2 direct, named, on-record claims about the same few seconds of audio, and they cannot both be true. Either Crump's team is right, and that video captures a moment of real tension before Nolan disappeared, or Shepard is right, and one of the most circulated pieces of evidence in this entire case has nothing to do with Nolan Wells at all. There is also a second disputed item that circulated alongside the video, a photograph reportedly showing someone resembling Nolan at a mainland location after his friends said he had already stayed behind on the island, with questions raised about when that photo was actually taken. It's important to be straightforward about this one. That claim hasn't surfaced in mainstream reporting on this case, and it hasn't been independently confirmed by any outlet covering the investigation. Where it exists mostly as online speculation, not as verified evidence. It's mentioned here only because it's part of what's circulated publicly around this case, not because it's been established as fact. What can be said clearly is this: nobody outside the people directly involved has confirmed whose voice is on that video. And the photo, whatever its origin, remains unverified. Both are open questions, repeated across social media as if they were settled, when neither one actually is. And there's one more layer to this case that can't be left out, because it's part of what's pushed this story into national headlines. Nolan Wells was the only Black member of the friend group he was with that day. Ben Crump has raised that fact directly and publicly, tying it to Mississippi's broader history, and arguing it's part of why the family is demanding a fully independent investigation, rather than accepting the early language used around an accidental drowning. Sheriff John Ledbetter, for his part, has said there is currently no evidence that a crime occurred at all. Both of those statements are part of the public record. Neither one has been proven. What's certain is that this case now carries the weight of that history alongside everything else still unresolved, and it's part of why so many people who've never met Nolan Wells or set foot in Mississippi are still watching closely for what comes next. So here's where this leaves things. Still no explanation for why Nolan stayed behind that afternoon. Still no official cause of death. An empty phone with more questions around it than confirmed answers. A video with 2 conflicting named claims about whose voice is on it, and a national conversation about race that neither confirms nor eliminates a single theory already on the table. The digital trail hasn't clarified what happened to Nolan Wells. It's only added more competing versions of the same few hours. A week after Nolan's body was recovered from the water off Horn Island, his family stood in front of cameras again, this time not searching, but demanding answers. Christine and Elmore Wansley appeared at a press conference alongside attorney Ben Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton, and the message from all 3 of them was the same. They weren't asking for sympathy anymore. They were asking for transparency. Crump used that platform to lay out what he called glaring contradictions running through the case. Not vague suspicion, but specific, unresolved conflicts. Who was actually with Nolan in his final hours, and who wasn't? Why his phone ended up in someone else's home instead of on him? And the question that's echoed through every part of this case since the beginning. How does a trained athlete, a strong swimmer, drown in a crowded stretch of water, surrounded by dozens of other people, without a single person noticing? Crump didn't offer an answer to that question. What he made clear is that, in his view, too many parts of this story don't fit together cleanly enough to accept the simplest explanation without a fight. On the other side of this, Sheriff John Ledbetter has continued to defend how his department has handled the investigation. 1 week after Nolan's body was found, Ledbetter confirmed publicly that his office has been conducting witness interviews and has also been in direct contact with outside agencies, including the FBI. He described the investigation in blunt terms: active, ongoing, still moving. He also credited the public directly, saying tips and information sent in after his office's call for help had been, in his words, very productive for the case.
We've got a lot of valuable information that has come from the public. We put out a call to action last week for that information, and it has been very productive for us.
That kind of specific detail matters because it's a departure from the vague reassurances the sheriff's department gave in the case's earliest days. It suggests a case that's actively expanding, not one that's quietly stalling out. Meanwhile, the promise of clarity from the independent autopsy hit a real setback. Results had originally been expected by Friday, July 10th. That date came and went. Crump later confirmed the delay wasn't due to new complications in the findings themselves, but to logistical issues transporting Nolan's body for the examination. It's a frustrating kind of delay, the kind that doesn't change what happened to Nolan, but does extend, once again, how long his family has to wait to hear it. The Mississippi Department of Public Safety addressed the pace of the investigation directly in a public statement, explaining that every case is unique and deserves a thorough review, and that cases can't all be handled on the same timeline. It's a fair point on its face. It's also not likely to satisfy a family that's now waited well over a week for basic answers. Outside the press conferences and official statements, the human toll of this case has kept surfacing in smaller, quieter ways. In Ocean Springs, community members gathered to remember Nolan and publicly call for more transparency in the investigation, a demonstration of how far this story has spread beyond just his immediate circle. Arrangements have also moved forward for his funeral, with local officials approving the Mississippi Coast Coliseum as the venue to accommodate what's expected to be a large turnout. And then there's Tresson Shepard, the friend whose voice became part of this story's most disputed piece of evidence. In a separate interview, Shepard spoke plainly about where he stands, saying everybody needs to let the investigation continue and let the facts be shown. He said if the facts show somebody harmed Nolan, he hopes there's justice. And if it was a tragic accident that somebody failed to speak up about, he said, he still hopes justice is brought either way. He closed with the simplest, most human line in this entire case. He said he's just waiting patiently to see what the facts show, because what he knows for certain is that he's lost his best friend. So here's where things stand right now, without speculation, without embellishment. No cause of death has been officially released. No charges have been filed against anyone. No evidence of foul play has been confirmed by investigators, the coroner, or the state medical examiner's office. The FBI is now involved. The independent autopsy, once expected days ago, has been delayed by logistics, not new findings. And a family that buried nothing yet is already making arrangements for a funeral, still without the one answer they've been asking for since the moment their son didn't come home. Whether the eventual results settle this case or open up an entirely new set of questions is something nobody watching this story, including the people closest to it, can say for certain yet. So that's where the case of Nolan Wells stands as of today. Underneath all of it is a mother and father who haven't slept properly since July 4th, still waiting for someone to tell them, with certainty, what actually happened to their son. This story isn't over. When those results finally come back, whenever that ends up being, they'll answer at least one piece of what's been unresolved since the very beginning. If you want to be here the moment that happens, the moment this case gets its first real answer, subscribe now so that update reaches you the second it's confirmed.